Thank you so much, Prabhu. Just to give a short introduction of Parama Prabhu, he is a senior engineering manager at MathWorks with a bachelor's from Indian Institute of Technology and a PhD from University of California, Irvine. Result of seeds that were sown when he was 10 years old. Since then, he inculcated habits of regularly reading scriptures and practicing meditation. Paramguru Prabhu serves as a spiritual trainer in the lives of many spiritual aspirants coming from all walks of life. He founded meditation clubs at various universities, UCI at 2003, Tufts at 2006, and Northeastern at 2009 to share his knowledge of how to live scriptural principles in contemporary settings. Thank you so much, Paramguru Prabhu, for offering to speak to us and giving us your association.
Hey Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for your kind introduction. I'm going to share a little bit of slides. Let's see if the sharing of the slides work. Is it working?
Yes, Prabhuji, we're able to see.
Excellent. Hey. So tonight, I thought of speaking on the topic of faith and its trajectory. So let me start with the Prana Mantra. Om Agyanat Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'm not going to begin by reading a verse of Bhagavad Gita, but I would refer to Bhagavad Gita in the course of my presentation. So I would like to see if we can keep the session in an interactive fashion. So would either of you, either Giridharan Prabhu or Kaushik Prabhu, if there is anybody raising their hands or anything of any indication, please feel free to call them out. Otherwise, I'm perfectly fine if you want to unmute your phone along the way and speak. And anyways, it's not a large audience, so I think the more interaction we can have, the better it is. All right. Okay, so let's first of all call out the specific word that is used to mean faith, and that is Shraddha. And we all have heard about that word, Shraddha. Now my question to you would be, what does the word Shraddha literally mean? Feel free to unmute and speak up.
I always thought it was only faith, bro.
Can you say that a little louder? I somehow
I
did not.
always thought it was always faith. I didn't know it had another meaning.
Honesty, you said?
I did not know it had another meaning. I just thought Shraddha meant faith.
Okay, but if you want to ask ourselves this question, what is it actually leading towards by having faith?
And believe in something, like
Belief
believing
in
in
something. Okay. Okay. Any other thought that comes to your mind?
that Krishna has everything tight in control.
Krishna, okay, can you say that again? If you can be louder, somehow I'm having a hard
Um,
time.
that Krishna has everything in control.
Okay, so you're
That
saying
nothing is out of control.
so you're giving a spiritual definition of faith, to have the faith that Krishna is in control, or he's the only one who is in full control. Okay, so that is actually taking it actually more into the spiritual realm. But I just wanted to first start with what the word Shraddha literally means, so that we can develop the subject matter from there. Alright, so if you divide this word into two parts, Shrad and Dha, it essentially means where we repose our heart. So, Shrad and then Dha, where we are reposing our heart. That's all it means. So, from that standpoint, is there anyone in this whole universe, for that matter, who does not repose their heart somewhere? Can you think of any example, even from a mundane setting, where it requires reposing our heart in something in order to function normally in this material world? Can you think of something? How about when we are, let's say, about to take a flight or about to board a flight going to whatever destination it is targeted? Do we ever care about checking whether the pilot really knows how to take uh, the flight in a safe manner to the destination? In other words, we are carrying faith that indeed the pilot is qualified and I don't have to worry about that piece. There are many other things I need to worry about, but I don't need to worry about that. Likewise, if you are sitting underneath a ceiling fan, we have a faith that the ceiling fan is not going to fall on my head. When I'm even making one step forward, when I'm walking on the street, based on my experience, I have seen that when I put my next foot forward, it just doesn't get pulled inside the surface of the earth, and then I would glide down into the inner portions of the earth. So one can come up with many conditions that we are surrounded by. We cannot think of a single moment that we are living without reposing our heart into something that we have now developed conviction about. The question arises, how is the faith getting formed? So typically in this material world, we are constantly receiving inputs from outside, and based on the inputs we carry certain kind of experience, and associated with a variety of experience that we are going through, depending on the mental makeup, we will come up with our own interpretation, and we will also have our sense of references that we consider to be valid. And on the basis of this, we will develop an understanding, and that understanding then further develops into an inner feeling that this makes sense, some logical sense we develop, and then that becomes further and further hardened into an opinion, that this is my opinion. And then opinion, when it gets further developed, it becomes conviction. And then the conviction, when it is further accentuated, it becomes something which is hardened reality for us. We sort of develop a rigidity about something. And it is very difficult for us to get unconvinced about that. So that is a typical trajectory of faith. Now suppose there is someone during our formative years who have constantly discouraged us about something, that you are not good in this. Then as we are growing up, we will start thinking, yes, I'm not good at that. Why? Because there is some reinforcement that is happening through the experiences that we are going through. And then over a period of time, with the recurrence of similar events, we start actually developing a rigid conviction that this is what is true. I'll tell you a story. So there was a little boy, and this boy comes back from school with a letter, and he hands over the letter to his mother. And the school teacher has mentioned that do not try to open, but give it to your parent. And the child obediently did so. So mother read the letter, and she said that this letter says that you are so good that the school does not have teachers who can impart you education at your level. And therefore, they are suggesting that you come out of that school because you're just too advanced for this school. And with that, then the mother decided to homeschool the child for the rest of his academic career. And then the same person eventually grew up to become Thomas Edison, who we all know that he was the inventor of the bulbs that we commonly use. So then it so happened that this boy, after 30 years, when his mother was no more on this planet, and he was visiting this old home, and then he was searching through something, and he happened to come across the same envelope that he had handed over to his mother more than 30 years ago. And then he was curious, so he opened the letter. And as he opened the letter, tears started dripping down his cheek. Because when he read what was actually written, it was a big shocker for him. He saw that the letter actually said that your son is mentally retarded, and therefore we cannot provide him education, and therefore you take care of your son, we just cannot take care of this boy. So in this way we can see, so it is not about what actually we are necessarily substantially carrying. Sometimes our environment is more powerful than what we actually are. And therefore, it is important that as a part of our growth, whether it is material growth or spiritual growth, as we go through experiences of life, it is important that we surround ourselves with encouraging people who understand us for who we are and carefully nudge us in the right direction, giving us proper encouragement. Otherwise, you can see that faith can be built in any direction you please. It just needs certain environmental factor. So now let's bring this into our spiritual realm. So we all are coming together to attend this Sunday feast because we all are serious about our spiritual cultivation. So in one sense, we all are on a journey. And if you see, this journey is essentially journey from the stage of constantly getting impinged upon by false ego to reach a stage where we are no longer governed by false ego, but we are governed by true ego. So you want to see how this journey gets formed, and what is outside of the spiritual journey, and what is within the purview of the spiritual journey, and what inspires one to move from one stage to another. So if you see the trajectory of faith at a very high level, it's essentially going from a doubting phase to a pious sort of phase to the stage where one is a practicing devotee. So I just wanted to keep this imagery in your mind while we go through the rest of the presentation. So we know that in the Bhagavad Gita, it is particularly stated in the 4th chapter that what actually builds our spiritual knowledge is faith. But faith itself is not sufficient. There has to be something else as well. Can you think of what that is? Anybody? So in the 4th chapter, there is a verse which says that Shraddhaval labhate jnanam tat paraha sametindriha jnanam labdva param shantim achirena digacchati. It is explained that Shraddha or faith can get transformed into spiritual knowledge when there are two conditions existing. One is that tatparaha, which means that one is dedicated. One is dedicated to spiritual knowledge and dedicated to one's own sincerity of spiritual pursuit. And then the second important ingredient is samyata indriyaha, that one is striving to control one's senses. So dedication and controlled senses, when you combine that with faith, that leads to spiritual knowledge. And the verse immediately following that, Krishna points out that those who are unable to do so, then they belong to the category of doubters. Now, as I was going through the explanation of the faith in general, as you can see, a large part of the development of faith is one's own experience, and then added to that is one's interpretation of the different varieties of happenings around them. And based on those interpretations that are constantly happening, one would develop faith. But then there is one more additional factor I mentioned, and that is the references. So as long as we are leading a materialistic life, we also have a reference point. And the reference point is that somehow or other I can extract that happiness from this material world. All I need is to try harder. So that's the kind of conviction that gets built up by our association within this material world. And therefore, you can see that reference can be either material or spiritual. So in the 16th chapter, Krishna says that one who rejects the scriptures, यह शास्त्र विधिम उत्सृज्य वर्तते कामकारतः न स सिद्धिम अवाप्नोति न sukham na param gatim. So in that particular verse, Krishna is explaining that if we reject the scriptures, then the reference point that we are left with is our own mind and the dictations of our own psychophysical nature. And therefore, based on our psychophysical nature, we will determine a particular kind of faith. So therefore, yah shastra vidhim utsrijya vartate kamakaratah. One just acts whimsically. Whimsically meaning what? According to the dictates of our psychophysical nature. Which means they are going to be colored by the three modes of material nature. And as a result of which, what's going to happen is that na sa siddhim avapnoti na shantim na param gatim. We cannot get perfection. There is no question of happiness, and there is no question of reaching the supreme destination that we all are meant to go as a spirit soul. So therefore, in the beginning of the 17th chapter, after Krishna spoke in the end of the 16th chapter, that ya shastra vidhim utsrajya, after giving up the scriptures, one who is acting whimsically, they literally do not have any place for receiving happiness or peace or satisfaction or reaching the highest destination. And therefore, as a result, one's life becomes a total failure. Therefore, naturally, Arjuna asks this question that yah shastra vidhim utsrajya, that one who has given up the scriptures, but that person can also take to some worship. Yajante shraddhaya anvitaha, that with faith, one may be actually worshipping someone. So, tesham nishtha tu ka Krishna, sattvam aho rajas tamaha. That if someone is not following the scriptures and yet taking the path of worship, which means one is taking to a path of piety, or one is interested in theistic conduct, but that even theistic conduct is not based on the scriptures. So then where is that going to be based on then? That was the question that Arjuna asks. And Krishna's response to that question is that trividha bhavati shraddha dehinam sa svabhavaja satviki rajasi chaiva tamasi cheti tam shunu. So Krishna says, indeed, that once one has rejected the scriptures, then that shraddha that you have, it is driven by what? Dehinam sa svabhavaja. It is coming out of your psychophysical nature. It is completely a figment of your imagination. So that's why in this overall world context, we find so many varieties of worship, so many varieties of ways of approaching the so-called God. Where are so many ideas coming from? So if the modes of material nature are going to interact, there are unlimited varieties that you can generate out of it, practically speaking. There is no limit to which you can permute and combine these modes to generate varieties of faith. And as you saw in the very beginning of my introduction, faith can be reposed in anything. In fact, faith is reposed in something at any given time. One cannot live without reposing one's heart in something. And it's therefore a matter of what we are using to shape our faith. So therefore, faith now is of two kinds. The shraddha is of two kinds. One is a shastriki shraddha and the other is a laukiki shraddha. Shastriki shraddha is that kind of faith that is based upon scriptures. And Laukiki Shraddha is that kind of faith which is going to be based on public opinion or our own mental setup, which is based on our own experiences as we are going through life. And therefore, Srila Jiva Goswami was very particular that Shraddha means it is not just Shastra Shraddha, but it is Shastra Artha Shraddha. And this is a very important distinction. So one may say that today onwards I believe in Bhagavad Gita. Does that make us a faithful soul? No. What makes us a faithful soul is when we are understanding the meaning of the scripture and then reposing our faith in that. So Yash Shastra Vidhim Utsrijya. So it's the varieties of injunctions that are stated by the scriptures. That's when one rejects, because of which one goes on to the trajectory of failure. So in other words, in order for us to have a proper faith, that faith has to have the foundation of the scriptures. Without that, it is just mental concoction. So you might have heard about this famous story. So there was a pujari who had been worshipping the deities of Radha Krishna in Vrindavan for a long, long time. And it so happened that in that temple there used to be a cat residing. And whenever the pujari will make an offering, the cat will come and eat the offering. So pujari was not so fanatical to think that, oh, the deities are indeed eating the food that is being offered. He was very rational as well, so he figured it out that it's a cat which is actually doing the mischief. Therefore, he started this whole ritual of beginning with putting the cat into a basket before starting to worship his deities. Now, this had been going on for many, many years now, because that's the practical solution he found. So he now reached a stage where he's about to leave his body, and his future generations are picking up on his way of conducting worship. So they also picked up exactly the way he would do the worship on the altar. But alongside that, they also picked up this additional rule that he had to put the cat in the basket. Now, the pujari left his body. This ritual went on for many more years until the cat also died. Now you could imagine, there was no communication from the pujari's side why that cat was being put in the basket. So that what got carried forward was the ritual. So now when the cat died, they found out how to get a cat first before they can begin the worship of the deities. So they literally found another cat, and then they would put that cat in the basket and then begin the worship. And you could also imagine that there would be someone who might be even writing their thesis on how it is important to have a cat in the beginning of conducting a deity worship.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, there seems to be some technical difficulties. I'll talk to Prabhuji and I'll try to get him back on. Hare Krishna. So on Parama Prabhu's side, there seems to be some power outage. So Prabhuji mentioned he'll try to join as soon as possible.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Really sorry, there was a power cut. Completely beyond my control. So let's see, now that puts me in a challenge to share what I wanted to share in the next 10 minutes. I'll try. All right, so where we are is that the basis for faith on our spiritual life should come from the scriptures. If it is not coming from the scriptures, then that faith would be based on our own psychophysical nature, and as a result, we would not be able to move in the direction of the perfection of life. So the prerequisite to practice and advance in bhakti is developing an attraction for Krishna. An attraction for Krishna comes from faith in the instructions of a pure devotee, especially mercy of a pure devotee. Therefore, we can now, with this framework in mind, broadly classify different individuals of faith in three basic categories, as I mentioned. There's the doubters, pious, and practicing devotees. So how do we define these? So Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami gives the definition of the spiritual faith, and that is that Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kaya Shudrida Nishchay Krishne Bhakti Koile Sharva Karma Krita Hai. That the spiritual faith is very simple. It is to put all our faith in one basket, and that is Krishna basket. That simply by pleasing Krishna, simply by satisfying Krishna, all that is desirable, that is meant to happen in my life is going to happen. Or whatever is needed for me to become perfect is going to be laid down by the mercy of Krishna. So all I have to do is Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kaya Shudrida Nishchay. The Sudrida Nishchay, that ultimate confidence, conviction, everything goes towards Krishna. That simply by executing devotional service unto Krishna, all my activities will reach their perfection. And perfection does not mean the material sort of result, but perfection means how our relationship with Krishna gets enhanced at every step of our endeavor. So doubters, so typically, so you can see there are two things that are coming into picture. One is the faith in the object of the devotional service, which is Krishna, and faith in the objective, and the objective is to please Krishna. So for doubters, there is neither faith in the object nor faith in the objective. So this lowest categories, this lowest category of individuals, they are going to doubt the scriptures, and therefore the 4th chapter 40th verse, where we talked about the verse that is just following the Shraddhava Lavate Jnanam. So there Krishna talks about the three kinds of doubters: Agyas cha Ashraddhanas cha Sanshayatma Vinashyati. Nayam loko asti na paro na sukham sanshayatmanaha. So here also Krishna uses the same kind of point that for a doubting soul there is no happiness either in this life or in the future lives. And who are these doubters? So these doubters, the first category is Agya. Agya means one who does not have any knowledge because of not having access to the scriptures. Ashraddhana is someone who has some knowledge based on their scriptural study. In other words, they have access to the scriptures, but they do not have faith in the scriptural messages. Sanshayatma is someone who has some knowledge as well as some faith in the scriptures, but little faith in the object Krishna or the objective Krishna objective of pleasing Krishna. So such a person therefore subscribes to all kinds of sub-religious practices based on his scriptural study, but is reluctant to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore thinking about pleasing Krishna is out of question. So Sanshayatma is someone who, in spite of having some knowledge as well as some degree of faith in the scriptures, just because they do not have faith in the object or the objective, they end up remaining in the doubting position. The second category of individuals is the pious set of people. So they have faith in the object, but they do not have faith in the objective of pleasing Krishna. So they dedicate themselves to even worshipping Krishna. But the problem is that they don't approach Krishna to please him, but they approach Krishna out of their own material motivations. And because of that, they are not eligible for Uttam Bhakti. So this category of people is what is brought out by the 7th chapter 16th verse, where Krishna talked about the 4 categories of pious souls who are engaged in meritorious activities, but they are not trying to please Krishna, but they are trying to please themselves. And what are those 4 categories? Artha, Artharthi, Jigyasa, and Jnani. So Artha is one who is propelled by their distressful condition to approach the worship of Krishna. Artharthi is one who is looking after their own economic aggrandizement, or they are seekers of wealth. So again, because of their own material motivations, they're approaching Krishna. Then there is Jigyasu, who is just inquisitive about just spiritual subject matter, or just generally inquisitive, and therefore that person is approaching Krishna. Or one may be actually Jnani. In other words, one is using, or one is habituated to use mental speculation in the spiritual discipline. So evidently each of these have some faith in the object Krishna, and because of which they are approaching Krishna, but they do not have faith in the objective of pleasing Krishna. So these categories of people are better than those who are doubters. So they would take to demigod worship, for example, because they would be not necessarily putting their faith in the words of the scriptures, where Krishna is calling out that aham sarvasya prabhavaha mattah sarvam pravardate, that I am the source of everyone and everything emanates from me, and therefore iti mam iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita, that position of reaching the stage of devotional service never happens, because one has not even accepted the point that Krishna is the source of everything and everyone. The third category is the practicing devotees who have faith in the object as well as the objective. And the individuals in this category have different degrees of faith, different degrees of faith in the object Krishna as well as the objective of pleasing Krishna. And therefore, they are eligible for practicing Uttama Bhakti. So knowledge and faith, they serve as important criteria for determining their advancement on the path towards Uttama Bhakti. And accordingly, Srila Rupa Goswami classified them as Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari. So here, Adhikari, that word simply means that one has some eligibility to advance forward. So for Kanishta Adhikari, it's also, you can see, based on the knowledge and faith. So Kanishta Adhikari is someone who has weak knowledge and weak faith. And because of his weak knowledge, one cannot convince others by scriptural arguments or cannot defeat opposing arguments. And weak faith means one is not convinced themselves to such an extent that they cannot be wavered under opposing sort of arguments. And Madhyamadhikari is someone who has good knowledge and strong faith. So good knowledge in the sense that they may not always be able to convince others, but may not be able to, and may not be able to defeat opposing arguments, but then they still have very good knowledge and strong faith, because of which they're totally convinced about the object and the objective. And in the case of Uttama Adhikari, they have strong knowledge and strong faith. And because of strong knowledge, they can convince others, and because of strong faith, they are themselves convinced. And it is therefore noteworthy that even Kanishta Adhikari is eligible to practice Uttam Bhakti because of having some faith in the objective, although that faith is pliable. So with this background, if I talk about myself, I have clearly started my own journey from the position of an agya or a foolish, when I was simply lost in the pursuit of mundane education. Because of my parents, I came in the association of devotees when I was 10 years old, as Kaushik was mentioning. Although I was very young, just by the spiritual influence of the devotees, I immediately gave up eating non-vegetarian food. And I started reading Bhagavad Gita on my own, but remained a Sanshayatma, a doubting Thomas. So gradually, I entered into a strong Jigyasa phase, but didn't go any further than that, as I was on my own in my own spiritual journey. So since my faith and knowledge were not developed, I didn't take the spiritual practices seriously. 13 years later, when I came to the United States for my higher studies, I started taking keen interest in furthering my spiritual pursuit. As soon as I landed in US and got a conveyance, I started regularly visiting the ISKCON temples. And seeing some sincerity in the heart, Krishna sent many senior devotees into my life to assist my spiritual journey. And just 2 years later, I contacted my would-be spiritual master, who made me an object of his love. And it is owing to his ongoing love and attention, I'm getting spiritually nourished, and I'm able to see Krishna as the object of my love and pleasing him as the goal of my life. And the degree of faith may not be adequate, but I do find myself within the house of bhakti, purely dependent upon the mercy of Guru and Krishna and all the devotees that Krishna has kindly placed in my life. So thank you very much. I didn't want to go so fast, but I lost some time because of the break. I hope it made sense.